Deputies and FBI agents surrounded the clubhouse with its traditional skull and crossed motorcycle pistons, warning unwanted visitors to stay away. There was no problem arresting the sole member in the house. Police say Dennis Delaney is the vice president of the South Florida chapter of the Outlaws. Though there were no problems, they'd taken every precaution just in case.
You have individuals in the Outlaws that would hesitate not 1 second to kill you.
Detective Faulkner has worked 3 years to connect gang members to more than a dozen murders in South Florida that had almost no witnesses outside the gang. One of the victims, an off-duty Dania police officer killed in 1977. Another, Naomi Senegal, who spent time with the gang. They allegedly just got tired of her.
A white female was taken on a boat owned by a member of the Outlaws, taken out into the ocean, shot in the head. She was then gutted or cut open and a steel cable placed through her body. She was drugged behind the boat until she disintegrated.
Deputies say the gang, which had its heyday in the 70s, was in the process of rebuilding its dwindling membership and filling the coffers through selling illegal drugs. Deputies believe today's arrest will not only close the books on what had for years been called unsolvable murders, they say it should deliver a crippling blow to the gang. In Hollywood, Luann Khan, News 4.
Drug dealers are apparently taking more drastic measures than ever to fool drug agents. In New York City, agents discovered 5.5 tons of cocaine packed inside hundreds of 10-gallon drums in a warehouse in the Queens borough of New York City yesterday. Surrounding the coke, a toxic chemical. The agents say the dealers figured no one would look inside the drums because of the fear of toxic exposure. Those drugs were found after a 3-month-long investigation.
The biggest single drug haul in U.S. history, 2.5 tons of cocaine. Federal agents used an electronic homing device to track a produce truck filled with cocaine from Miami to Chicago. The cocaine was hidden in furniture, statues, and ski poles, and it was packed among the fruit boxes. 3 men were arrested in the raid.
And 3 juveniles and 2 adults were arrested in a late-night raid. Police found a stash of crack, guns, and a live hand grenade. Also in the East Bay, $2 million worth of marijuana plants were seized at warehouses in Oakland and Hayward. 3 people arrested there. And in Santa Clara, a municipal court clerk is accused of selling PCP from her desk. Police say the deputy clerk, Cynthia Navarrete, also provided classified court information to other drug suspects.
Several towns to which the cocaine had been mailed. They were held without bail. A 6th suspect now is being held in New York. A 7th was arrested today in Panama. Pentagon sources tell NBC News that over the past 3 years, there have been more than 40 shipments of cocaine, totaling more than 1,000 pounds altogether.
In Baltimore, a suspected drug dealer was arrested last night. Police say he was selling crack cocaine, and while it happens all the time, this time the suspect is 8 years old. Julie Rockner has the story.
In the southwest Baltimore neighborhood where police made the arrest, it was big news, not because an 8-year-old was involved, but because he was caught and written up in the headlines.
Why y'all making such a big deal out of it?
You don't think this is such a big deal?
It's not, because people around here do it younger than that. 8 years old, we got some out here 7 and 6 years old doing it.
But police rarely arrest second graders.
In the last 10 years, approximately 10 children under the age of 10 have been arrested for possession of narcotics. So we don't see it as a problem of children under the age of 10 involved in narcotic transactions.
The child's mother says he's been in this kind of trouble since he was 7, and she's afraid she might lose him to juvenile authorities or worse.
Yes, I am feared for my son because he had a father killed the same way, drug-related.
You know how dangerous this is?
No. Yeah, I know how dangerous it is.
Though he says he expected to get $4 or $5 for holding the drugs, police say the job normally pays youngsters $100 or more, and that makes it tough to keep the kids on the right side.
It's a shame when he's more afraid of the police than he is of the local drug dealers. That's the shame.
Julia Rockland, Southwest Baltimore.
And a police officer and a suspected drug dealer who was holding a hostage were shot and killed in a violent shootout in Alexandria, Virginia. TV station WUSA in nearby Washington, D.C. videotaped the graphic event, and Charles Osgood has details.
The gunman emerges from a house at about 6:30 last night, holding a sawed-off shotgun to the head of a hostage. The gunman and his hostage are surrounded by police. One officer, crouched in the doorway, lowers his weapon. raises his hands, and asks the man to drop his gun. A witness says the man entered the house demanding crack cocaine. He has already released 4 other hostages in a siege that began 2 hours earlier. Now, watch closely. What happens will happen quickly. Another officer on the left opens fire.
To shoot who?
That flash was the man's shotgun. A police officer falls forward, mortally wounded. A second officer has also been hit by the blast. The hostage has spun away out of sight and safe. The gunman, also off to the right, is shot dead by other officers. He lies in a yard as police medevac helicopters rush both wounded policemen to a hospital. Veteran officer Charles Hill, 40 years old, dies in the hospital of severe head wounds. The second officer has suffered leg wounds, but he survives in stable condition.
CBS will have more on this tonight.
A mother has been arrested on suspicion of selling her children for sex in order to get drugs. Channel 7's Paul Jeske has the story tonight. Paul?
Richmond police say the youngsters involved are a 12-year-old girl and her 9-year-old brother, offered up for sale as receptacles for unspeakable sex acts by their mother and grandmother. Even veteran police investigators are shocked at what the children are now telling them.
Some of what we're hearing, we wouldn't be able to put on camera. Some of the acts were quite vicious in nature. Anytime you have children involved in sexual acts that range in the hundreds, we believe, it's a terrible story.
Investigators say the woman is suspected of drugging the children with cocaine, marijuana, and sleeping pills.
There's some indication that there may have been drugs involved in some cases to sedate the children so that these sexual acts could occur.
Officers say the children were taken from their mother last May and put in custody of Child Protective Services after a single case of child molestation was discovered. Only in the last few days have the kids felt safe enough to start talking about forced acts of prostitution that allegedly involved at least 80 customers. Most of the sex acts occurred in the children's own home, and police say the operation was expanding through advertising.
Some of it was word of mouth, some of it may have been newspapers, and we're looking at some other methods that may have been used involving both the mother and grandmother.
Howard says the children are apparently physically okay, despite sex acts involving pain and bondage.
Some of the information we have is that some of the acts may have involved sadomasochism. That's still being investigated. Some of the other acts were equally as unusual and distasteful.
And the motive behind the kiddie sex ring, police say, was drugs. The customers paid the mother madam with a combination of cash and drugs. Police are withholding her identification tonight to protect the identity of the children and to save them from shame and suffering. They were just 10 and 7 when all this began. The grandmother, by the way, is still being sought by the Richmond Police Department. The mother will be arraigned tomorrow.
Thank you, Paul Jeske, reporting on the story that continues to evolve, because the question that is next, the question that remains, is what happens to the children, the victims of sexual abuse. Joining us now...
The idea of interviewing teenage hitmen and gang members to Executive Director Rick Eckel.
Well, you know the rules. No names, no addresses, right?
Okay.
You have to stay away. You can't know names. We can't protect you if somebody wants your sources.
Okay.
Okay.
I promise.
Okay, then go for it.
This is going to be so good. God.
This potentially dangerous assignment doesn't even faze this broadcast journalism major at San Francisco State, who was born and raised in Oakland. Holly wants to get the real story from a teenage perspective and hits the streets with her tape recorder.
I'm not that afraid to go and talk to people. Hitmen, prostitutes, pimps, Walter Cronkite, anybody. Once you've got the microphone in your hand, you're unconquerable. You sit there and you go, okay, I'm ready for anything. And you just go out and you tackle them. But then you don't remember the reporters who get in real trouble, who get killed, who get threatened, you know, and you don't think about that. You think of the adventure. You think of the excitement of going out there and conquering the world.
I never got shot or nothing like that, so I guess I've been pretty safe. Some people ain't had it so easy.
What do you mean?
They gone, they dead, they got took out.
Friends of yours?
Few. Some not so friendly.
Are there teenagers in gangs selling drugs?
Sure, there are teenagers in a lot of games selling drugs, you know. It's all about surviving now, you know. You can't, it's hard to get a job. Nobody wants to work at Wendy's for $3.35 an hour. You know, why not stand on the corner and sell drugs and make you about $300 or $400 in a couple of hours? You know, most people get out there at 9 or 10, about 7, 8 o'clock, they close shop up, they got $300 or $400 in their pocket. 15, 16 years old.
At the time, when you're sitting there interviewing him, you're kind of going, oh my God, why is he talking to me? Should I be doing this, you know? Well, maybe I should be asking more in-depth questions. I mean, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. I should be really taking advantage of this and probing and finding out what it's like for him, what was his experiences were like. And you don't want to blow that chance.
When I hit 18 years old, I started breaking out with guns and stuff, serious.
How serious?
Real serious. My friends started just, you know, dying and stuff, getting shot and stuff for no reason at all.
I wanted a reputation out of this too, though. See, don't get me wrong. I mean, I wanted to kill him on the simple fact that I wanted a reputation too. I mean, you know, that's right, I want to be known as a killer.
After the interviews are recorded, Holly takes them back to the Youth News Oakland-based facility to begin post-production for her Youth on the Air report.
Not really killing, but, you know, killing. Killing.
Because some of the hitmen and gang members Holly interviewed didn't wish to physically appear on television, the tapes Holly is now editing for her radio show are not the same as the ones we shot on camera, but the information is graphic.
Say like you were my boss in this street affiliated thing, you tell me, I want you to make a hit. I have to go do it, or you have me killed.
You want to create radio, you paint pictures in people's minds with words, and you let the person, if you have a good interview, you let the person tell their story. 3, 2, 1. You hear about them in the streets, you see them on TV, and you read about them in the newspaper. But what are gangs really like? And are they responsible for all the things they're being blamed for? Welcome to Youth on the Air. I'm Holly Kwan. It's fine. You sure? Positive. I got Connie Chung's job next.
After the interviews are dubbed and edited and the script written and recorded, it's time for the final mix session.
You're giving up gangs, so everybody wants snitches get eliminated.
Sometimes use gang like a substitute for a family, like you don't have fathers.
I don't think the shows constitute any change. I don't think anything's going to change. The drug wars are going to stop or anything. But maybe it showed gangs in a little more realistic. Since I talked to the kids, I talked to people who are directly involved. So I may not get an award. So I may not, you know, get a job out of it or something. But it, you know, makes me feel good that I can really do something that I'm proud of.
Youth News is completely supported by donations, but they'll dissolve soon if they don't get some funding. So if you'd like to contribute, write to us, and we'll be sure that you get in touch with them. Our address will appear just after this break and previews from next week's show. Stay tuned.
Good evening. Chicago police are still looking for 3 suspects tonight after they broke into a Southwest Side home during the pre-dawn hours and killed a 73-year-old bachelor during a burglary attempt. Dead is Frank Wateca of 5239 South Troy Street. Rick Rosenthal reports the victim's brother, 70-year-old Bruno Wateca, is lucky he too wasn't shot and killed.
The 2 bachelor Wateca brothers had lived in this quiet Southwest Side neighborhood since 1948. Early this morning, 3 men broke into their home. One of the 3 had a gun.
He come into my bed, put a gun to my head. He says, "Get up." And I got up, and my brother was laying on the floor. They told him to lay on the floor. And then I had to lay alongside of him. And they start questioning us, "Where's the money? Where's the money?"
Bruno and his brother told the robbers they had no money. The robbers ripped the phone out of the wall so there could be no call for help and began ransacking the Wateka's home, looking for the money they were convinced was hidden there. While two tore the place apart, the robber with the gun kept turning back to the terrified brothers.
Every 3, 4, 5 minutes, points the gun. He says, "Where's the money?" Brother says, "I don't have any. This is the last time I'm telling you. Where's the money?" Shot him.
After shooting his brother, the robbers continued to terrorize Bruno for another 10 minutes before they finally left. He wasn't hurt. He ran next door to a neighbor's house and called police. By then, it was too late for Bruno's brother. Police arrived within minutes, but Frank Wateka was already dead, the victim of a single gunshot wound. Investigators gathered what evidence they could as they began trying to find the three men involved. The three described as white, all in their late 20s, all roughly 6 feet tall. Because none wore masks, investigators say one hope is Bruno can identify the robbers from mugshots.
Well, we have to go downtown and pull some photos and then try and work off of those photos that the surviving brother can identify, possibly, you know. If we can get him to look at these photos and possibly put together something that looks like the guys, we can work from there.
How hopeful are you?
Well, right now, it's 50-50. Leaning both ways. We don't have anything concrete to go on.
It turns out the Wateka's home was burglarized 8 months ago. They were away then, but given that incident and now the murder of his brother, Bruno Wateka feels lost.
I don't know whether I'm going to move out of here or move in with my sister or do something. Well, after 2 incidents like this, sort of sours you a little bit, don't it?
For WGN News, I'm Rick Rosenthal.
And Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates reacts to the arrest of his son for stealing narcotics.
Drugs are killing young people, and he's a prime example of just exactly that.
Channel 5 News at 10, the #1 primetime news hour in Los Angeles. Now, Emmy Award-winning Hal Tishman, Debbie Davidson, Larry McCormick, Steve Roll with sports, and the entire Channel 5 news team.
Good evening. The son of Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates is in jail tonight, charged with the armed robbery of a Huntington Beach drugstore. 29-year-old Lowell Gates is reported to be a drug addict who committed the crime to support his habit. Sam Chulin has the story.
An anguished Los Angeles Police Chief Daryl Gates is wondering what more could he have done for his son to prevent this latest family tragedy. The 29-year-old Lowell Scott Gates, an offspring of Chief Gates' first marriage, is in custody on suspicion of armed robbery of a Huntington Beach drugstore. Chief Gates says his son has had bouts with drugs since high school, has gone through rehabilitation. Now this.
He is responsible. He's 29 years old, and he has been told all of his life that he is to be held responsible for the things he does, and so he will get no assistance from me.
According to witnesses, the young Gates came to this drugstore, loitered around for a few minutes, and handed one of the pharmacists a note demanding drugs. He said he was armed.
He was very calm and just stood there and waiting for his package. He never did get rattled or anything that I could see.
One of the druggists chased the suspect to this neighborhood about a block away. The suspect ran to this house, where his mother lives.
He entered the home. He had 3 men pursuing him. Immediately, 6 police officers came to the scene. They used their PA system to order him out of the home. They had their dogs waiting, and they were prepared to call the SWAT team, but neither were necessary. He came out a half hour later and surrendered peacefully.
The young Gates is now in jail. Next up, a court appearance for arraignment on armed robbery charges. In Huntington Beach, Sam Chulin, Channel 5, News at 10.
When Mike Tyson destroyed Michael Spinks last night, the immediate question was, who can stand up to this guy in the ring? But before he gets to his next boxing opponent, Tyson faces another challenge familiar to heavyweight champions. How to be sure that when the punch is gone, the money remains. As NBC's Robert Lipsyte reports tonight, Tyson is involved in a messy financial tangle involving old friends and a new family.
Mike Tyson needed only 91 seconds last night to claim his title as the baddest man on the planet. But the opening round of his latest heavyweight battle will be much longer, the lawsuit against his manager. That's Bill Caton, who with the late Jimmy Jacobs financed Tyson's career. Jacobs' widow, Lorraine.
I'm very disappointed. We love Mike. We've known him since he was 13. And Jim and Bill have treated him as they would a son.
Tyson claims that Caton and Jacobs never told him that Jacobs had a terminal illness when Mike signed a new contract in which Caton would become sole manager upon Jacobs' death. The relationship between Tyson and Caton began to unravel recently when Tyson's wife, the actress Robin Givens, demanded an accounting of her new husband's worth.
History has said that athletes get ripped off. I just don't want it to happen to Michael.
Joe Louis, who 50 years ago this month beat Max Schmeling in the so-called fight of the century, died broke. And Muhammad Ali, once the most exciting sports figure of his time, has lost most of his money. Tyson, who's not quite 22, has already made millions, and so have those around him. Still, Caton and others have called Robin Givens a greedy wife.
If Michael wants to stop fighting after this fight or after the 5th fight from now, I want him to be able to do so.
I wasn't really appreciative of what you guys, quote, the reporters did to me. Building up to this fight, you tried to embarrass me, you tried to embarrass my family, you tried to disgrace us. And as far as I know, this might be my last fight.
Early retirement. Now that would be the upset in the sorry fiscal history of the heavyweights. Robert Lipsyte, NBC News, New York.
It was Jesse Jackson's announced sympathy for the Palestinian cause that angered some Jewish leaders in this country. Things got even worse last week when reports surfaced that Jackson had privately referred to Jews as Haimis. After a week of denials, Jackson tonight admitted making that remark. Tonight's admission comes as tensions between Jackson's supporters and the American Jewish community continue to grow. Bob Faw has that part of the story.
The setting was Chicago. The audience was a nation of Islam, black Muslims, but the target was American Jews. The man who has enthusiastically endorsed Jackson accused Jews of poisoning the political climate against the candidate. And citing recent threats against Jackson, Farrakhan issued a veiled threat of his own.
Why hurl stones at him? Is our champion. If you harm this brother, what do you think we should do about it?
Last night, Jackson did not disavow those remarks or disassociate himself from them, and today he did just the opposite when he launched a new attack on Jewish leaders.
There is, in fact, a documented evidence now that many Jewish leaders and rabbis, as well as the JDL, in fact, have assumed the responsibility to hound this campaign.
What Jackson calls persecution ranges from the disruption of his presidential announcement by Jewish hecklers to picketing of his Boston office by members of the militant Jewish Defense League, to this advertisement in the New York Times from a group calling itself Jews Against Jesse, to this memo given reporters by the Anti-Defamation League, which outlines a series of statements by Jackson which the League considers offensive.
Jackson, now back in New Hampshire, is angry about what happened, which is why he chose to escalate and not diffuse the controversy, which has dogged him all week and hurt him in the polls. He still wants to meet and plans to meet with Jewish leaders. Today, one of them said Jackson's latest charges simply aren't true. Bob Fall, CBS News, Manchester.
The search is continuing tonight for 2 men missing in a boating accident near Oak Harbor. They were aboard a 16-foot pleasure craft that apparently struck a submerged object off Whidbey Island about 5 o'clock this afternoon. Officials say neither man was wearing a life jacket. The damaged boat was recovered, but so far there's no sign of the men who've been aboard. Coast Guard and Navy helicopters are taking part in the search, along with a Coast Guard cutter and some private boats.
The state's case against 6 Miami officers is now more powerful than before. The Dade grand jury, after convening for nearly 5 hours, has agreed to issue a lengthy list of indictments, 27 counts against the policemen and 3 civilians, nearly all charged in last July's murder and drug ripoff of 3 suspected drug dealers in the Miami River. Facing 3 counts each of first-degree murder, racketeering, drug trafficking, armed robbery, and other charges are Armando Estrada, Roman Rodriguez, and Armando Garcia. Rodolfo Arias is indicted on conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, drug trafficking, racketeering, aggravated battery, and grand theft. Arturo de la Vega facing counts of drug trafficking, racketeering, and aggravated battery. Osvaldo Coelho also indicted on similar counts. Key testimony against the officers coming from the chief investigator, Metro-Dade homicide detective Alex Alvarez. He and State Attorney Janet Reno refusing comment. However, the indictments are a rubber stamp of the state's original charge.